What's up, everybody? This is Raphael Garcia, and I am redoing the 48th episode of the MMA Ratings podcast. There were some technical difficulties from last night's attempted late night taping, so just wanted to get back on the horn and talk to you guys about the MMA action that we have going on this weekend, starting tonight, actually. So don't forget that there's some Friday night UFC fights going on, along with looking at some of those fights and some of the news from this week. And first and foremost, as always, and thank you guys for your support. You can catch us at MMAratings.net, where myself, Adam Martin, Schwan Humes, and Michael Ford bring you not only interesting pieces about the sports world, especially mixed martial arts, but you can definitely dive in and rate the fights and let us know what you think about the action yourself. It's probably one of the only places in the world where you can tell us, grade via a star system, how well you thought every fight went down. So after every fight this weekend, feel free to hop over to MMAratings.net and let us know what you think. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter under the same name. And you can catch us on SoundCloud and other podcast streaming outlets around the interweb. So, as always, thank you for taking your time to listen to the show. You can like and share our content. As always, like it on YouTube here, share it across the social media channels. And thanks again for giving us some of your time throughout the busy week. So, with that being said, I want to go ahead and jump into the conversation for this week because we got quite a bit to talk about. I want to start with a discussion of just some news items from this past week. There wasn't a whole lot of news that went down this week, but at the same time, there were some interesting quotables, I should say, from a few different people. I want to start with Alistair Overeem. We all know Overeem, who's one of the most, I want to say most well known, one of the better known heavyweights to ever compete in the sport. He's a multiple time champion. He's challenged for the UFC title, but even though he's never been able to win that, and he set the fight for Ricky Werdum this week. Is it this weekend? He's fighting Werdum, or is it next? Yeah, he's fighting him this weekend at 213. That fight's kind of gone under the radar, but that is their third fight. They're 1-1 against each other, but uh, Overeem had some pretty interesting words for another prominent heavyweight who's not even in the UFC today. He was speaking about Fedor, and for those who don't know, Fedor dropped about to Matt Mitrione last week at Bellator 180, the last week or the week before, but he dropped the fight to Matt Mitrione. They both had a double knockdown, and then Mitrione basically recovered faster, got on top, and finished the fight. That was Fedor's first loss in his last five. I think he was on a five-fight winning streak, but that was stopped. And it was yet another knockout for the man who was considered the greatest heavyweight of all time and who had almost a 10-year undefeated streak. But Overeem had some pretty interesting comments to say, not only about that streak, but about where where Fedor is in his career, and also kind of hints at how much left he has in the sport. So I'm going to read his quotes and then kind of comment off of that. First thing he said about Fedor is that he's not the greatest heavyweight because he declined to fight me on two occasions while I was Strikeforce heavyweight champion. This is Overeem speaking, and basically what he's saying is that he'll go later on to say that he had the opportunity to fight Fedor, which was probably the biggest heavyweight fight at that time in 2009 and 2010, and he claims that Fedor declined those fights both times. And he goes on to say that the people that Fedor beat during his run, he called them cans. And in his exact quote was like, I think Fedor had a great run in 2002 to 2005. And after that, people talk about 10 years undefeated and blah, blah, blah. But after 2005, who did he fight? He fought cans. He declined to fight me on two occasions in 2009 and 2010. So that's some pretty harsh words there because, as I mentioned, this was one of the big fights that could have occurred back then. It was this fight. Earlier than that, it was the idea of getting Randy Couture to fight Fedor. That never happened. And then there was the potential fight to get Brock Lesnar to fight Fedor as well. That never happened either. So those are three. Though looking back now, those fights could have been massive. And to think that we just completely missed out on them, I guarantee we'll never really know the true story why we missed out on those fights. But those could have been three huge fights for. It most likely would have occurred in the UFC. This one would have occurred in Strikeforce, Fedor versus Overeem, but it was just complete misses. And every sport has those, especially boxing has those as well, where great fighters never got into the ring together, or they got into the ring like one time and never kind of solved things, like Lennox Lewis and Klitschko. So you see those situations, but this one right here is interesting. I think part of it plays into the management system that Fedor at the time had around him, where he was very protective of his brand, very protective of what he did when he fought, who he fought, and in what organization he fought and who promoted it. There was a lot of questions always surrounding that, but three really big opportunities that we just missed out on because for whatever reason. And Overeem also goes on to speak about Fedor's legacy. And he basically hinted at the fact that Fedor has taken so many losses recently that it's began to crush what legacy he did build. And I'm with him on that, because what you see is that people always will have a revisionist memory about things. Fedor has lost. He went from 2001 all the way up to 2009 without losing any fights. He had one no contest against Antonio Nogueira back in Pride in 2004. But other than that, man, he was defeating everybody. And I mean, he beat some guys during that run. It wasn't that he was fighting cans, as Overeem put it. He defeated Heath Herring, Nogueira, he defeated Gary Goodrich, Yuji Nagata, Mark Coleman, Kevin Randleman, and he beat Nogueira twice. Faced him 3 times, but beat him twice. He beat Mark Hunt, Matt Lindland. I mean, he fought some guys: Tim Sylvia, Andre Arlovsky, and Brett Rogers. Brett Rogers wasn't that big of a name, but after losing to Werdum in 2010 by that triangle, that loss itself, people kind of thought of as like a fluke of sorts. Then the wheels fell off. The next year, he's getting knocked out by Antonio Silva. I mean, he's getting battered by Silva, like just hammered. A few months later, he's fighting Dan Henderson, getting put out in a blaze of glory. Those 2 guys went balls to the wall, and Dan Henderson came out on top there. Then he kind of went away for a little while, and then he showed up in M1 fighting Jeff Monson. He fought Satoshi Ishii in Dream. He fought Pedro Hizzo, Jadip Singh. And then it was the fight against Fabio Maldonado, where he just did not look good. He got a decision victory that a lot of people questioned, just because it just seemed they brought Fabio in thinking that he would get the doors blown off of him, but he didn't, and it was a very questionable decision. And then he fights Mitrione a year later and gets stretched. So I am not going to totally disagree with Overeem's comments that Fedor is now hurting his legacy, because it does seem pretty damning, and it does seem pretty interesting that Fedor is still fighting, and I don't even know if he needs to. It's one of those things where maybe he needs, I don't know, I doubt he needs to from a financial situation, but he's doing so, and you have to wonder why. And I want to compare it to conversations that were going on about BJ Penn as well. BJ Penn's another guy. He lost to Dennis Seaver, didn't look good at all. When he lost to Seaver last Sunday, and people are also asking there, why is he still doing this to himself? Why is he still stepping out there? Like, this isn't him getting the doors blown off of him from like a Yair Rodriguez or a Frankie Edgar blowing through him. This is more of BJ just getting beat, like, just getting outgunned. Um, just getting This is more just about BJ getting outgunned, and he just didn't look good in that fight against Seaver. And it's the same thing with Fedor. You know, he just did not look good at any point in any of these losses over the last 5 years. So you just have to wonder, like, what is going on that he's still stepping into the cage, and should the promotions around him just stop? Like, should they just stop bringing him in, just stop trying to put him in that position where he is, for lack of a better term, going to get himself hurt? And Overeem kind of spoke about this as well with his quotes, where he said, let's see, let me pull his exact quote. When you're looking good in your performances, then you don't need to have that talk. But when you're looking bad in your performances, then I think you need to have that talk. Overeem said, when you're racking up consecutive losses, then you should start having those talks with yourself, your foundation, and the people around you. Which, I don't disagree with, and I know that this is something that always comes up when we see older fighters getting back into the cage. And what is going on is that people immediately begin to question, like, whether or not these guys should still be getting in. And you see it with Vitor, you see it with BJ, you see it when there was conversations about Chuck Liddell signing back with the UFC signing back with Bellator to get back into the cage. Matt Hughes was having talks about getting back into the cage. Ken Shamrock's still getting in there. The list goes on and on, that when these guys retire, they don't they don't retire and stay away. And that's always hard to kind of have that conversation with guys. It's always hard to tell them that they should walk away from the sport. Still, Overeem's comments kind of rang true, and it speaks to that bigger conversation about when is it time for guys to walk away from the game of MMA. So Fedor has not responded. I haven't seen any responses from Fedor at this time, but I think that it is something worth bringing up, because it's something worth bringing up because it's a situation where it could only get worse over time, and no one wants to see Fedor or any other fighter, regardless of if you're a legend or not, continuously getting battered for the duration and getting yourself hurt throughout your career. So you definitely don't want to see that in any shape or form. So let's go on. Let's talk about some of the other things that went down this week. So there was some other action as well, other interesting news bits. Probably one of my favorites from this week, because this is a rare situation. This is a very rare situation here, where we have Dana White apologizing in a sense, and apologizing to a person who deserves the apologies probably more than anybody else in recent memory with Chris Cyborg. So everyone is very aware of um, everyone's very aware of the strained relationship between Cyborg and the UFC. And I'm not going to sit here and say that everything is on the UFC side. That's not it. Or all the misgivings. That's not the case. What I'm going to say though is what I'm going to say though is that it really goes on both sides. She's had her issues, but the UFC has definitely had their mistreatments of her. Like, let's kind of run down some of the things that have been done. So first and foremost, there was the press conference from, I think this was 3 years ago, where Dana White called her Wanderlei Silva in a dress, which was completely disparaging. I mean, it's sexist, it's borderline disgusting. It was just uncalled for. Then Joe Rogan, who is a UFC employee, UFC commentator, talking about Cyborg, saying that she has male genitals. He also apologized for that. Then the UFC allowed Ronda Rousey to talk about Cyborg in the phrase of an it instead of she. And this is a running track record. They don't. This is not something you should stand for, regardless of if it's someone who's easy to get along with or not. Yet the UFC just kind of stood by it and allowed it to go down. So on this week on the MMA Junkie, I think White was that was last week. Excuse me. Last week, Dana White was talking to MMA Junkie, and he basically fessed up for it. He said, this is his quote: "We signed Cyborg. We made a commitment to Cyborg. Not everything is easy. Not everything is as fun as other divisions or whatever. But we made a commitment to this woman, and she's had a rough go here in the UFC. She hasn't been thrilled with things that have been said, things that have been done. And to be honest with you, we've made some mistakes. So we've made some mistakes when it comes to Cyborg. The least we could do is get our shit together and get this woman to fight for the title." So they have booked Cyborg to fight Tanya Evinger at UFC 214 for the women's featherweight title after Jermaine Durrani has drawn a line in the sand and said that she's not fighting Cyborg because she's a cheater, which isn't the full story. And after some back and forth, they've stripped GDR of the title, and then they booked Cyborg against Megan Anderson. Unfortunately, Anderson has travel issues that kept her or forced her out of the fight. So now you have Evinger, who is Invicta's bantamweight champion, basically using this opportunity to get to the UFC because she couldn't get an opportunity to get to the UFC either, to make the jump and go up to 145 to fight Cyborg for the featherweight title. Not the greatest situation. Evinger is an interesting fighter, though. She's someone I've been wanting to see in the UFC for a long time, just not under these types of constraints. Still, this is about the way the UFC has treated Cyborg, and I think it speaks to a lot. It speaks to a lot, especially when you look at Felice Herrick's comments from last week after she fought on Sunday. When you look at Amanda Nunes, what she said this week in leading up to UFC 213, and that the UFC has an issue, and I use issue in air quotes, that maybe they don't promote all of their fighters the right way. And maybe like the situation is, if you don't fit a certain mold, that he or she doesn't get promoted the same way that just doesn't get promoted the same way that would benefit them and the organization. So it was interesting to see Dana White actually apologize. And man, there's so much to kind of break out from this. Even like when USADA contacted Cyborg about the failed drug test, Dana White's response was, "Are you surprised?" or something along those lines. Come to find out, he had to eat his words because USADA basically exonerated her by giving her a retroactive TUE, which clears the whole thing up. So I'm glad that the UFC finally took the steps to, I don't want to say beat a bigger man, but they've taken the steps to acknowledge that they've made some mistakes with how they've treated this woman. I think that they need to really take a long look at how they do treat some fighters as opposed to others. More and more athletes, especially the women, are getting more and more vocal about the lack of opportunities that come their way if they don't look a certain way. I mean, Felice's comments, you have to hear and kind of, I don't want to say raise an eyebrow to, because of what she's done in the past when it comes to self promotion, but to hear her say that she is not young and beautiful enough to get promoted, it causes pause. And then at the same time, you have Amanda Nunes talking about the way the UFC is pushing Valentina Shevchenko, another blonde woman. I don't know. I was going to say blonde hair, blue eyes, but I don't know if her eyes are blue. But she fits that Paige Van Zandt, Ronda Rousey mold. Even Michelle Waterson, she doesn't. She is a beautiful woman, mother who she's the karate hottie. So the UFC definitely hitched their wagon to her very quickly. But the UFC, especially with the women, again, I always say, especially with the women, they are more prone to promoting athletes that look a certain way rather than those who physical characteristics look something else. Even Tanya Evinger has said this. Let me see if I can find her quote, but Tanya has said something about not getting into the UFC that kind of fit along those lines. Let's see. So back in, let's see, this past March, there was, let's see if I can find this quote really quickly. It's pretty interesting. So here goes. So this was Evinger talking in an interview with Mark Riamondi on MMA Fighting back in March of this year. And she talks about the UFC not contacting her and not getting her a potential contract. She says, "That's just a prerequisite. Did Tanya Evinger beat you? You're signed." And this is her joking. She also says, "It's not that I don't want to fight for the UFC. I just don't want to fight for somebody that doesn't want me to fight for them. That should be anybody's outlook on anything in life. Why should I try for something when they don't even want me here? Obviously, I'm still going to do the best I can, but I'm not going to beg to do something. I just hate watching myself get overlooked. It was the same way in wrestling, and it's the same way in every sport. I don't fit the mold that people like right away. I think when they get to know me, they like me, and they understand my sense of humor and who I am. That's when I become friends with people. But a lot of people at first think I'm an asshole. I rub off on people the wrong way, I guess. I think they're more of an entitlement. Excuse me. I think they're more of an entertainment company now anyway. But geez, man, I think I'm pretty entertaining. I think they're missing the boat. I don't know what they're scared of." So this was Evinger back in March of this year. And she also says, here it is here. all these hype trains that everybody is putting behind all these kids that have the look, that have the attitude, but they don't know how to fight. That's the problem. You can only powder their record so long, and eventually they're going to have to fight a good fighter. So, Avengers comments, all these comments kind of fall within the same boat that the UFC is, that they're pushing fighters of certain ilk based on who they look or what they look like. And I'm not saying I'm just saying I get that, but in some regards, it's still it's man, it's becoming more and more apparent, and athletes are becoming more and more outspoken about it. So I understand their struggles and I understand their anger toward the situation. I definitely get it. And yeah, to see Dana White apologize for the treatment of Ronda Rousey over, or excuse me, the treatment of Chris Cyborg over the last few years, caught me off guard. Definitely caught me off guard, and was something that stood out to me when looking at. Also, this week there's a fight announced where we have Paul Daly fighting MVP in Bellator. It was pitched to be sometime in 2018 that this fight was going to go down. There's also the angle that MVP will be boxing in the meantime, which is, it's something. I'm not even going to really kind of touch on that, but MVP basically he's been pushing for these opportunities, and Bellator president Scott Coker basically said that they're going to give him the plans. Daly last appeared a couple months back where he lost to, basically straight out, he lost to Roy McDonald, and Daly's one of those guys who is a real litmus test for anyone looking to break through to the second stage of MMA action, or excuse me, the second stage of the Bellator welterweight division. And this fight interests me, um, because I was kind of expecting it to come. These two guys have been taking shots at each other for an extended period of time, and I'm not too surprised that it's finally going to go down. I think this is a fight for MVP to win because he's much more of a dynamic striker. Daly is a violent, heavy hitter, but I mean, he definitely has the technique to land in almost any shot that he wants. I love his uppercuts, by the way. Him and Anthony Johnson probably have the best uppercuts in mixed martial arts, but me and Shawan can argue about that another day. But what um what is most telling? Like, there's a lot of things I'm thinking about. Just sitting here right now, thinking about this potential fight. Just a lot of things are kind of lining up for me. Um, and I'm thinking about it because first you have MVP, who I think is on the cusp of becoming a contender for Bellator. Let me, out of curiosity, let me look at what he's done in the promotion since he's been there. I'm not too familiar with his whole record, but he's 30 years old, 12-0, and he's won. Let's see, he fights in a row for Bellator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight fights for Bellator, but he hasn't really defeated anybody of a big name. Like Nashawn Burrell is probably the biggest name he's fought out of this group, and that's just because Burrell's the only one. Or excuse me, Cyborg Santos as well. They're probably the two biggest names that he's fought to this point in his career, just because those are guys who's really kind of stepped out and made it, I guess, to the bigger stage. But let me see something. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Yeah, So here we are now, and we have a Page versus Daly fight. I'm gonna let Shawan do the actual breakdown of this fight. I'm just thinking of it from a promotional standpoint. I think it's time for MVP to kind of start getting that push that will make him into a star. The fan reaction to him is still kind of interesting because you have those guys who like his antics, and then you have those who hate his antics as well. Like the rolling of the pokeball, the dancing and all that stuff that he does. People get pissed off at that. People were pretty mad with how he picked on Ronda Rousey after she got knocked out as well too. So he's becoming one of those icons that's like one of those characters that people either love or they love to hate. So he's someone that the organization can definitely build their brand around. At the same time, they are struggling to have homegrown stars. They have Michael Chandler there. They not have Douglas Lima an extent. They have who else? Koreshkov is I'll consider him a homegrown star. They're developing their women's divisions. So Paul Daly can definitely be someone. That's not Paul Daly, but Michael Page can be someone that can be added to that list. So I am looking forward to this fight. 2018. I mean, it's a little far away, but still, at least it's going to go down. At least it's going to go down. And the other side of this story is that you have MVP doing boxing, and the opportunity was provided to him to either do kickboxing or boxing, and he selected boxing according to Coker. So he wants to get some boxing in like that. I feel, I think it's I don't think it's a bad idea for these guys to look and want to start to diversify themselves. I'm not going to argue that point. I think it's a good idea for these men and women to begin to do more than just commit themselves to a promotion that's not necessarily committed to them. But I wonder what the end game is really going to be. You didn't see a lot of success with this, with guys doing kickboxing and MMA, but at the same time, I think boxing has a much broader audience than kickboxing does, so there is more opportunity there. Obviously, everyone's paying attention to Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor, which is going to be a rolling shitstorm until August 26th gets here. And you're going to see more guys wanting to take that leap. So I'm not too mad at them for it. I'm interested in seeing the way it goes and kind of what happens from there. But this is a fight that I am looking forward to seeing when it does occur. I hope it occurs sooner than 2018, but if not, I hope Billy stays active because he's one of the guys I enjoy. I enjoy watching fight because, man, he puts people on stretchers and he does it in such violent fashion that I love seeing him getting out there. Let's see. The last news story I wanted to talk about was Jeff Horn defeating Manny Pacquiao in one of the. I want to say this. Ooh, I want to say this victory was probably more questionable than the Timothy Bradley loss that Pacquiao took a few years back. And that was my first time even thinking of that comparison. But everyone remembers the Timothy Bradley situation from what was that 2014, I believe, where everyone watching the fight believed that Pacquiao did enough to win, but the judges leaned towards Bradley instead, in what was a very controversial decision. Same thing could be said here. Man, I didn't even. I'm surprised at that. And I'm kind of surprised that what's the word? That comparison just kind of sprung on me, because that was a bad decision then, and this is a bad decision here. Most people had it for Pacquiao. The official, let me see, the official judges cards, I think, were 117, 111, and then two 115, 113s. Let me see. Um, Hold on one second, because I don't want to turn off the background noise. There we go. So yeah, 117, 111, and 115, 113. And this is, man, this was crazy. Um, Pacquiao had Horn hurt multiple times. He couldn't finish him. It looks like he kind of took his foot off the gas towards the end. Some people say that Pacquiao was kind of slowing down because he was tired. I don't know if that was the case, but he did a lot to kind of batter Horn throughout the fight. So I want to go back and rewatch this. Um, I mean, so much so that the WBO had to tweet out about it and say that this is their quote from the WBO Twitter account. The discretion of a referee or judge cannot be reversed, except in a case of fraud or violation of laws, which is not the case in Pac versus Horn. So we got to look, and he's supposed to be taking his rematch clause and using that to fight him again at some point in this year. ESPN commentators kind of went in on, especially Stephen A. Smith, calling it a robbery. They just went down that rabbit hole. I mean, even if you look at the CompuBox numbers, Pacquiao landed nearly twice as many shots, was more accurate than Horn throughout the fight. So this is, man, these things happen in combat sports. Judging is a shit show where you have men and women who may not know what the hell they're watching, trying to decide who won or trying to decide who got the victory. So it's very questionable at best. And when you look at situations like this, you gotta kind of just let it roll off your back, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen in MMA. It's going to happen in boxing. It's going to happen in kickboxing. It's going to happen across the board. It even happens in wrestling. There was a controversy surrounding Kyle Dake and what's his name, Jordan Burroughs from the team trials last month. So this is going to happen. It's going to happen time and time again, and people are going to be pissed about it. So it is what it is, and it's kind of just one of those things that we gotta accept in the sports world. So I'm not upset about it as everyone else is. I'm not as pissed off, but man, I'm not really surprised. This was just a very bad decision that I would probably go back and watch at some point, just to kind of get a better grasp of what the judges saw. So with that in mind, we're going to turn towards talking about the two big events we have this weekend. We have two really big, I don't say really big. We have one really big event in UFC 213, and then we have one not so big event from a name standpoint. Maybe not from a name standpoint, but from an interest standpoint. So let me pull up. I gotta pull up the fight card though, because I just lost it. So let's see. We have tonight. We have UFC The Ultimate Fighter season 25 finale. That show's still going on, but that's another conversation for another day. Where Justin Gaethje is coming over from World Series of Fighting, where he was a dominant champion, definitely a hell of a fighter, and he's facing off against Michael Johnson. That's what that fight stands out to me. I want to see Mark Diakase. I want to see what he does. I'm also interested in this Elias Theodorou Brad Tavares fight. That's when I'll be talking about Angela Hill as well. And just in this, and I'm gonna talk more about some other fights that stand out to me as well. But this is a pretty solid card. It has a couple of fights that are worth talking about, worth really paying attention to. And it has some other fights that may not seem to be the greatest, but they still do. It is what it is. So we have Michael Johnson and Justin Gaethje fighting in the main event, and I think this is, if I am, what's his name, Marlon Morales' camp, I'm looking at this fight because I think this is a better matchup for Justin's UFC welcome or UFC introduction. This is a much better fight than Morales fighting Raphael in Brazil for his first fight. I think he was at a high disadvantage there in comparison to this bout here. You have Justin, who's 17-0. Man, this guy is he is a violent fighter. The man just gets the job done. If you look at, let's see. He joined World Series of Fighting in 2013. And in 2013, he won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now he won 10 fights. 9 of them ended by some form of TKO. 9 of them. The only one that went the distance was his split decision win over Melvin Guillard, and that's a fading Melvin Guillard. So I think that raises some interest in how well he's going to do in the UFC. But man, this guy goes out there to beat the brakes off of people. Like, if I ever got into a barroom brawl somewhere, Justin might be one of the guys I want to have with me, because he's going to go out there and he's going to go slanging them hands. And I think that this fight against Michael Johnson is going to be just like that. I don't think it's going to be technical at all. I don't think it's going to be anything that is very what's the word? Anything that's going to be very slow paced. I think these guys are going to come out there and they're going to start fast, and they're just going to start slinging at each other. If that occurs, I definitely put the advantage into Justin's wheelhouse. I think he's more technical than Michael Johnson, who tends to throw very looping punches. But I'm also worried. I am kind of slightly worried about the amount of damage Justin has taken to this point in his career. He's 28 years old, and while he's had a lot of big violent victories, it doesn't mean he hasn't been touched as well. So we're going to kind of see what his body has left in this fight here. I think it's going to be a stoppage win for whoever does kind of come out on top. I don't think this fight is going to go 5 rounds. I'm leaning towards Justin to get the victory, but I wonder what he looks like in this fight and how he hangs on from start to finish. The UFC the UFC lightweight division is a bona fide Shark Tank. There are killers among killers among killers in this weight class, and Michael Johnson is just the tip of the iceberg. In a sense, he's just the tip of the iceberg. You have to wonder what Justin looks like in this fight and what's next for him, because you can't go from a Michael Johnson and then go right to Tony Ferguson. That would be scary. Right to Eddie Alvarez, right to Nate Diaz, or anybody, Edson Barboza, Paul Felder. Like, there are guys in this division who wreck people, and I want to see how Justin deals with that long term. Because I think this is the right fight to introduce him to the organization. I definitely do, but I don't know. I don't know what his long-term viability is within the company. I just don't know, because I don't know how well he's going to fare when he dives into the deep end. But we're gonna get a preview this week when he steps in there to face Michael Johnson. Also, what else stands out from this card? You got Jesse Taylor and Diego Lima. That's from the Ultimate Fighter season 25. I don't really care to talk too much about that. Mark Diakase. He's actually someone that's pretty interesting to me because he is a surging light. He's another surging lightweight, but he had some comments this week that stand out to me that show that I respect because it shows that he's treating himself as a professional athlete. He's not bullshitting, for lack of a better term. Let me find the quote here. Let me find a quote. Let me find the quote. Let me find. Here we go. This came out yesterday. I didn't. So interesting. Valentina Shevchenko's sister is doing MMA as well too, and she's another model. Anyway, I'm going to come back to that in a second. So Mark Diakase, he was offered to fight against Paul Felder, and what he said was very interesting. I'm going to read all of his quotes from this piece by Peter Carroll on MMA Fighting, where he says, "I find it funny when I see some guys that are calling me out. I'm only coming up, and there are some established names looking to fight me. If I started training when I was 10, I would be on a different level now. I only started training when I was 17, so I think I've still got a lot to learn. I feel like I'm getting better every time. They don't realize that I'm trying to show a different side of my game every time I fight. I feel like I've done that every time I fought in UFC. The way I see it, if all these guys are calling me out, I must be doing something right. They were talking about me fighting Paul Felder in Glasgow. This is a guy who has fought Edson Barbosa. He's got experience fighting some big names. I looked at my contract, and I just didn't think the money was there for a fight like that. I knew that we would be one of the most talked about fights on the Glasgow card if it was booked. It just didn't make sense for the money I was on. A lot of fighters complain about money. You see guys like Stevie Ray. He's fought in a lot of big fights and against a lot of big names. We've seen him on Twitter talking about how he should get more money, and he probably should get it. By the time I get to top guys in the division, I want to be comfortable. I want to be able to just fight 2 times a year so I can take the time to prepare for each opponent. The fighters at the top of the bracket have a lot more experience and they deserve a lot more attention." What else did he say? People can say what they want about me, but I think I'm being smart. Of course, we're fighters. We'll fight anybody. But I think it's important to know that there comes a time when you should be taking the bigger fights. You don't always have to be in a rush. He talks about the new contract that he just signed, and now he wants to build to the fighting the bigger names when the bigger money is there too as well. This is exactly what more fighters should understand and respect, because at the end of the day, your job is to be a prize fighter. Your job is to go out there and fight for the biggest prize. Your job is to get out there and fight for the most amount of money possible. People can talk about championships, they can talk about records. Those are it is what it is when it comes to those 2 areas of the game. But prize fighting is fighting for a financial prize. Chael Sonnen gets this, Conor McGregor gets this, Floyd Mayweather gets this. That's why these guys are out there doing the damn thing, and they're raking in money hand over foot every time that they compete. Mark is young in the game. How old is this guy? He is 24 years old. And, he has 3-0 in the UFC. His toughest fight was against Frankie Perez. Um, and you have to wonder, like, I listen to these comments and I'm like, this guy gets it. He understands that he needs to build his resume before taking on these dangerous fights. And Paul Felder is a dangerous fight in every shape and form. Paul Felder is a dangerous fight. You do not want to be underprepared facing a guy who has gone to war with some of the best men in the division. Paul Felder is one of those guys who's on the cusp of being a contender for the champion on a moment's notice. On a moment's notice. So I definitely appreciate what Diakese said, and I'm looking for, he's fighting Jakar Close, who's also someone who's undefeated. Let me see what this guy's done in the UFC so far. I think it's his debut, actually. No, it's his second fight in the UFC. He fought in January, where he defeated Devin Powell. And there's also video of them getting into an altercation yesterday after the weigh-ins. You know, it is what it is. But I think that this is an interesting fight that's kind of caught my eye, and I'm looking forward to seeing what goes down there. Also, there's the Elias Theodorou Brad Tavares fight. Man, Brad Tavares is one of those guys that everybody just kind of forgot about. You know, he was surging for a while. He was someone who was building his stock in the middleweight division, and then it just all fell apart. He lost to Yoel Romero, lost to Tim Bosch. I mean, this guy has a win over Lorenz Larkin when Larkin was kind of doing his thing. So he lost to Romero, lost to Bosch, then he lost to Robert Whitaker. And even though he's coming off of a split decision win in his last appearance, you know, he's not that same guy that a lot of people thought he was going to be. I mean, he's 14-4, but that record doesn't really speak to his placement in the division. So I'm looking forward to this fight and seeing what he looks like. Same thing with Elias Theodorou. Elias is one of those guys who has the making to be. He has that look. You know, I talked about earlier. You know, the UFC definitely has a look that they wanna shape guys in when they promote him forward. You know, he's 13-1, 4-1, and 5-1 in the UFC. Excuse me. So I think that this is a fight where people are going to have a lot of eyes on him because they want to see what's next. And both of these guys, I'm interested in seeing what they look like in these fights because I want to see what's next for these guys. I want to see where their growth is. Where's their ceiling? Right now, I feel like the verdict is still kind of out on both of these guys. It's more so out on Elias than it is for Brad. But this is a fight that kind of caught my eye when it was originally booked. Let me see. Angela Hill. You know, I love Angela Hill. I think she she's one of the few black women on the UFC's roster, but I love that she continues to get in there. She continues to try to improve herself every time, and she takes the tough fights without any hesitation. Time and time again, she takes the tough fights, and she does it over and over again. She's facing Ashley Yoder. I think Ashley Yoder's undefeated. No, she's 5-2, excuse me. So I'm hoping that this is a fight, not a showcase fight. I don't want to use that term, but I'm hoping that this is a type of fight where she can stand out and do her thing because she's definitely someone who I love seeing her compete. And I'm thinking that this is a good opportunity for her. So I'm looking forward to seeing her fight Ashley Yoder as well. Then another fight that I'm very interested in. I mean, Gray Maynard's fighting. I completely forgot about that. Gray Maynard is getting back out there. He's another guy. You know, you got to wonder what he has left. How much is in his gas tank at 37 years old. He's coming off of that ridiculous fight against Ryan Hall from last December. I mean, he's won one fight in his last 5 and 2 in his last 7. So that tells you a lot there. Tells you a lot. But he's stepping back into the cage. Tecia Torres is also coming back to face Juliana Lima on short notice. And this fight is listed as the opener for the event. I'm not sure if it really is the opener, but that's another fight that I'm interested in as well because Tecia Torres is one of those women who you forget about in the strawweight division, but she's right there as well. I mean, 8-1. Right there. She has wins over Angela Hill, Magana, Felice Herrick. She's beaten Rose. You know, she's gone 1-1 against Rose. She's defeated Paige Van Zandt. She has a good resume on her back right now, and I think she's ranked in the top 5 Sure, she comes out there and she stomps Juliana Lima, who's someone who a lot of people had a lot of stock in. I think that she continues to put her name on the short list of, hey, don't forget about me. Don't forget that I'm someone out here in this women's strawweight division that's ready to make some noise. So I want to see her do well tonight as well. Like it'll be interesting to see what happens from there. Like, this is a pretty good card. It doesn't have that huge title fight that everybody kind of really wants, but it definitely has a grudge match sitting in the main event slot. So it's something that I think is worth watching, and I look forward to seeing it tonight. I want to move on to UFC 213, which is Saturday's card. And this is a very good card as well. Obviously, we have Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko. Oh man, where do I start with this? UFC may be missing the boat when it comes to Nunes. She's definitely putting herself. She's a champion. Period. I mean, she has wins over Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey. No one else can claim that. She has the story behind her where she's come from nothing. The UFC's first gay champion, and the organization continues to talk. I don't want to say not that they don't talk about her, but they tend to focus more on her opponents than they do Rousey, or excuse me, than they do Nunes. And see, I just did it there. They really do. I mean, obviously, you look back to the fight against Ronda Rousey where there was no promotion about Nunes, very little, and you look at this one, and Shevchenko's getting her fair time in the spotlight. And not saying that it's wrong to look at the contender, but you gotta wonder just how much are they missing out talking about Amanda Nunes' story here. Yeah, and the thing is, they fought before. Nunes has a win over Shevchenko. A lot of people are like, well, that was only 3 rounds. What is Nunes going to look like in 5? Totally agree with you. That's the storyline heading into this fight, and that's something I want to see. But I don't think that we should completely. I just think that there's a layer to the story that is being missed by not properly talking about Nunes and what she means to the organization, what she means to women fighting in the sport. She's a trailblazer, in my opinion, and I think that she kind of deserves more respect that she's getting right now. I think I even saw something this morning about her being the underdog heading into this fight. Let me look that up and see if that's still true. But man, I think a lot of that. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm going to go ahead and say it. I wouldn't be surprised if she did lose this fight because because of the gas tank issues, because of the other problems that she's had in her career. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that she's a world beater, but let me see, fight odds. Let me see what the odds are for her. Yeah, it's even right now, man. The odds are even, and that says a lot about this fight here. A lot about this fight. So I really think the UFC is potentially missing the boat on how they speak about Nunes, and they need to be careful because she's someone that I don't want them to miss the boat on her. I don't want them to overlook her and what she means to the sport and make a big mistake with not covering her correctly. So I think that this is a big moment for her. She needs this win, and she needs to look dominant in this win. She can't look shaky at any point in time because her critics are waiting for her. They're coming for her. Her English is getting better. It seems to be in a sense that maybe she's a little shy when speaking to the media, but she's coming out of a shell. She's joking more. She's smiling and laughing more, and she seems to be more open in answering questions. And I think the language barrier is a part of that. But she's her like I said, her English is getting much better. I think that this is an opportunity for the UFC if she does pull out a win for them to build another champion that fans should get behind because she's a positive character. And I think that I don't, again, as I said, I don't want the UFC to really miss the boat on her. We have an interim title fight when we have Yoel Romero and Robert Whitaker getting things on in the cage. And this is a fight that's really interesting to me because on one side you have Whitaker, who has the speed and technique, and you have Yoel Romero, who has the athleticism. He also has technique when it comes to wrestling. He has patience too, which is something that a lot of fighters don't. I want to say people don't break down a lot, but he has a lot of patience, which is very important for the fight game. But man, I think Whitaker is the face that you want to win because he's definitely more promotable. Man, the name Bobby Knuckles is absolutely amazing to begin with. That's my favorite nickname in professional sports right now. And he goes out there and he's looked great since making the move to 185. I mean, he's won 7 in a row. Stopping Jacare was huge. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this fight here because he's facing Romero, who is a crazy. No one wants Yoel Romero in the cage. Michael Bisping knows for a fact. He's like, I want no part of this. I don't. And I think, and to see Yoel kind of have grown to become the challenger, the contender that he is, has been interesting to watch. You know, he's 40 years old, so people immediately jump on the steroids bandwagon, and they can say whatever they want. You know, it is what it is. But this guy is a freak of nature. Look back to his time when he was competing in wrestling. Look at his training videos, man. I was watching a video of him this past week where he's hitting fireman carries on guys one after the other. Like he was throwing pillows. He was tossing grown men like he was tossing pillows onto the bed, one after the other. No hesitation, no slipping technique, no resetting, nothing. One after the other, after the other, after the other. And stuff like that, steroids does not do. I don't care what you say. Stuff like that, steroids does not create. And this man has never failed a drug test. He's been in strenuous drug testing for majority of his career on the level of Olympic competitors because that's what he's done. So to just assume, oh, he's 40 years old and he's ripped, you can't just point the finger at steroids. That's laziness. That's laziness. Look more into what this man has done. Look more into his training regimen, and you'll see a guy who was an athlete, a guy who works harder than us, who works harder than the normal people, a guy who goes out there and just puts in the work. And his body is proof of that. His abilities are proof of that. And this is a fight where you have two guys who are going to go. I'm interested in seeing what this fight looks like over 5 rounds. I don't think Yoel has not fought 5 rounds. I'm looking at his record right now. Everything's been in 3. I don't think Whitaker has as well, though. No, Whitaker has not gone 5 rounds either. So it'll be interesting to see what both of these guys look like in the championship rounds. But this is not a fight to be missed in any way, shape, or form. For weekend, we're doing Alistair Overeem. I talked about it briefly when I was talking about Alistair's comments earlier today, but this is the 3rd time him and Werdum are fighting. They both have a win over each other. Their last fight was very, blah. It was pretty piss poor. And I'm expecting this fight to look a lot different. Werdum's more aggressive in his striking, but he still has that world-class jiu-jitsu that can submit anyone at a moment's notice. And Overeem is Overeem. He's going to go out there and he's going to do his thing. He's fighting much more smarter now, much more patient, picking his shots. And I think that that's going to be something worth watching. How patient is he against an aggressive Werdum if he can land a big shot? I'm wondering what Werdum, if he tapers his aggression, if he tapers it in a way that he'll look better than he has in the past. But I think that this is an interesting fight that I'm also looking forward to. And I'm not the biggest fan of heavyweight MMA. Everyone knows that, but I am looking forward to this fight here. The fight that I want to see the most though this weekend: Anthony Pettis and Jim Miller. Anytime Jim Miller steps into the cage, he is not going to make it an easy out for anyone. This dude, win, lose, or draw, this dude goes out there. He goes out on his shield. Anthony Pettis has been struggling as of late. Miller is not the guy you want to go in there and struggle against. Even though he hasn't looked great in his last few fights. I mean, he's won 3 of his last 4, so there is that. But man, he's going to go out there and he's going to put the pressure on you in any way, shape, or form. And I just think that this is going to be a fun fight from start to finish. It's going to be action packed. And Miller's been in the UFC for 10 years now, almost 10 years now. It'll be 10 years in 2018, so just about there. But he's a guy that you don't want to miss out on. So I think that this is going to be a very fast-paced, interesting fight. Pettis is coming back up to lightweight. He lost to Max Holloway. He's won 1 of his last 5, so he's definitely been struggling, man. Dos Anjos, Eddie Alvarez, Edson Barbosa, Max Holloway beat him, and he defeated Charles Oliveira. So this is an important fight for him. You gotta wonder what this guy is going through at this point in his career. So there's definitely that. But I'm looking forward to this fight because it's going to be a barn burner in every sense of the case. It's going to be a 120% barn burner. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time talking there because both these guys are going to go. They're going to be aggressive, and I'm expecting it to be fun. It'll be a very, very, very fun fight. So that's something I'm looking forward to this weekend as well. There's other fights that kind of dead. I think the undercard on the Friday night fight may be a little bit stronger. But there's still some value in UFC 213. UFC 214 is the one that everybody's looking forward to, though. That is not next weekend. That is it's the 25th, I believe. UFC 214 is the 29th, excuse me. And that's the fight where everyone is definitely getting excited for. So with that in mind, I'm working on. I didn't get a lot done content-wise this week, but I'll be looking at these fights and probably doing some pieces, some breakdown pieces afterwards after the events are over the weekend. As always, we'll be back for another edition of the show this coming Thursday. Shawan will be back, and we'll be back to our regular time. So feel free to join us there. If you like this content, like and share this content across all of your social media channels and give us some support. As always, we appreciate everyone who listens to our show. And thank you guys for listening to another edition of the MMA Ratings Podcast. Be sure to check us out on SoundCloud and YouTube here and every other outlet as well. We appreciate your time and thank you guys and have a great weekend and enjoy the fights.